Sahana bhavatu, Sahano bhunaktu, Saha viryam karavavai, Tejasvinavaditam astu ma vidvishavai. Om Shanti, Shanti, Shanti. May that one protect us both. May that one nourish us both. May we work together with great energy and vigor. May our study be illumined. May we not unnecessarily cavil with each other. Peace, peace, peace be unto all. So this is a Vedanta series question and answer. And so as usual, I'll mute my microphone and wait for any potential questions. Please go ahead with your question.
So there's two questions on you actually. When you take a decision, how should you take it? With your intellect or your mind? And what's the difference between the two?
Okay, thank you. So the psychology that we apply in Vedanta actually comes from the Sankhya philosophy, the Sankhya geography of a mind. Is adopted widely. The Vedanta only adds to this to say that all our objects, and the body and the mind are objects, just as anything else an object. They're all essentially only aggregates. Aggregate means they are formed from various parts, and anything that is put together will naturally disintegrate and fall apart also. That's the rule about it. So is it just a rule, just a legislature thing? No, it's just common sense. You can test it out with multiple examples. You take a car, for example. The car has many different parts. Sooner or later, it'll become rusty. Sooner or later, you will have to replace parts because all parts wear out. And the knitting together process is what we call life itself. And very often a common question is, what is life? What is the thing that holds things together? And the standard answer to that is prana. That means a mobilizing energy, something that moves something. Is equivalent to Isaac Newton's idea about force. We require something doesn't want to move, something has to move it consciously, deliberately. Otherwise, it won't move. So what moves the mind? The mind is an aggregate like anything else. And if we replace the term mind with this term, antakarana, internal instrument, we have a better grasp of the geography or the various parts and components of the mind. And that's compatible with our experience. So we see something in front. There are various characteristics, namely, there's a multiplicity of things in front, many, many different things. But there's only one witness, one seer of it. And that witness has to be one. That's what makes it a single witness. Now let us say, for example, that the sense organs are witnessing this multiplicity, but you know, I said sense organs, more than one. There must be an observer for that also. So there's an observer for objects. Let's represent it with the eyeball. But we can try and find out whether the eyeball is in any condition at any given moment, whether it's fresh, whether it's scratchy, what shall we do about it? So clearly, some witness is there behind that. Then we ask, what is that? Well, it is a whole field in which all mental activities occur, such as feelings, recollections, memories, reactions. All kinds of activities take place there. But with this huge selection, whose characteristic again is multiplicity? We can see that there's a witness to this multiplicity and also the sense organs and also the objects. Now, so far, what we call the internal sense organs, that is the replication of what we see and touch and taste, all with, and the recollection and awareness of what is happening in the mental field, all of these we can be aware of. The whole lot we can be aware of. In fact, when we close the outer windows, the outer instruments, the inner ones remain. And when they remain, our awareness is in a realm of dreams. But who ultimately is aware? Now, there's a great discourse going on, a great debate in the scientific world, saying that there are really only two major outstanding questions. And one question is the nature of consciousness itself. And of course, naturally, people are looking at what we have described so far. That is an objective consciousness, an awareness of something. And naturally, if you have a bent of mind that wants to have reductionism as your worldview, then you will try to say that all these activities described so far, other than the objects, will be part and parcel of an objective consciousness. We don't disagree with this, but it doesn't ask the critical question. The philosopher David Chalmers says, consciousness is the hard problem. Well, we don't think it's a hard problem because nobody asked the question, who knows it? Who is the knower of it? Now, with all this range of information, with all this range of mental activity, we know that there is a certain functionality in deciding. There's an executing faculty, a choosing faculty. We may say that there's something like a free choice or free will going on. There's a debate whether it's real or imaginary, never mind. We know there's a faculty that is able to review various alternatives. The Katha Upanishad and the Bhagavad Gita registered this in the language of what is preferable, Shreyas and Preyas, what is preferable and what is pleasurable. And if we weigh it up correctly, properly, and evaluate it like an adjudication in a court, then we will see that there's a tendency to move toward the pleasurable, but proper investigation and discernment will tell us that this will not be a permanent solution to our central quest of happiness. It'll end in either sorrow or at least impermanence, and we'll want it again, and we won't come to any conclusion about a desire for fullness. Everyone has a desire for perfection or fullness. We can use alternate terms, freedom, for example. And so the preferable is a different way. And when we go along the preferable and see the merits of it, then the experiential part of that will be that it becomes blissful. We then find this is a formula for happiness, is a formula for fulfillment. So this discerning faculty we call the intellect. And what we call the other range of mental activities in the mental field, we can label mind. When we make a decision, what do we require? We require both. We require all the information presented through the series of fields, reports from all the fields, and we require the intellect to nicely evaluate it properly. And we'll make the right decision if we evaluate the decision on the basis of what is good all round for the maximum, for all inclusively what is the best. And sometimes that's a difficult decision. And so there's another component that has to be there. And that is instinct, inspiration, divine inspiration. We get it when the intellect is purified. When the intellect is aligned to the cosmic mind. Cosmic mind is our way of saying a personal God. In the Christian prayer, thy will be done on earth as it is in heaven, it's exactly this. Seemingly my personal will has to be aligned to a cosmic will. And then I know, this is the right thing. And along these valuations will be the capacity to watch, to be watchful, to look for what I call all the green lights. One green light, all right. 2, 3, 4, 5, it'll be obvious. This is the way. on the basis that there is a guiding divine will behind everything, a cosmic intellect. We call it buddhi. In both cases, we call it buddhi. One of enlightened intellect is called Buddha. And so the language that the Sankhya's use will be buddhi, the intellect. The cosmic variety of that they label as Mahat, the great one. In philosophy, we'll call it Hiranyagarbha. In mythology, we'll call it Brahma. In other general language, we'll call it cosmic mind, cosmic Christ, cosmic Buddha, cosmic Ramakrishna, whatever you like. It is the divine will that has the creative capacity to coordinate everything else. For this reason, we have to be aligned to it, because whatever we want at the end of our experience, namely in terms of all the scenes in front of us, will rely on God's will. God's will means our particular instrumentality tuned into that, like a radio tuning into a cosmic broadcast. Once we tune into it, the cosmic broadcast and the internal reception will be one and the same and arrive instantaneously. This is called divine inspiration, the voice of God. That means we have to be in a listening mood. That means we have to be prayerful. What is prayer? Prayer is the art of stillness, listening, and responding. This is called prayer. We think that prayer is some kind of application, some kind of begging mechanism. Lord, give me this and I'll give you that. Not at all. It is lining up our individual will with the cosmic will, our individual mind with the cosmic mind. And when we do that, we have a straight line. All the solutions will come to us. The greatest works of creativity come on the basis of the phrase, it came to me. I was walking in the forest. Suddenly it came to me. Beethoven was walking in the forest, and a whole symphony came to him, just from a few notes. So that various commentators on his music will say that somehow he had a line to God. This is how one composer put it. Bernstein, he put it like this. If you take every component of Beethoven's music, you'll find fault with it. But the form of it was perfect, and no other composer ever had it. It just means that the next note in the series is the inevitable note, despite the fact that it looks as if it's going off in a strange way. The next note is exactly the right one. And he puts it like this. Bernstein says, it's as if he had a telephone call to God, a telephone connection, to say that this note must be the next one. And no other composer ever had it. Maybe no other composer had it since. So this is the mark of genius, whether it's in the realm of art, music, poetry, science. I'm not really a poet. Some people think I am. But all these reflections and so on started off in the COVID, really came within a half-hour gap every day, sitting down with just an openness. Please, Lord, you fill me. What do you want me to say? And ideas started flowing easily and naturally. Any solution that comes in this way will come easily, naturally, and be the obvious solution. It'll be the only solution available. No other solution can be there. So it's this combination. If you want to do this, then you have to have the patience to watch. Where are the green lights being supplied to me? And the red lights are obvious. The red lights result in my banging my head. The green lights are smooth. They're obvious. They're presented easily, naturally. They're recognizable. Don't doubt them. Go with it. Go with it on the basis of a faith that this is a divinely inspired impulse. Come to me. And then, of course, we have to apply. We have to be opportunists. We have to be patient, like a fisherman or fisherwoman, we have to say these days. Any person watching and waiting for that movement on the rod, being patient enough to do that, then taking the opportunity, seizing the day as it is, without hesitation, without any doubt. And then application of work, of course, is necessary, and a faith that all the resources that we require are presented to us, that every problem has a solution somewhere. It's just waiting for discovery, that's all. Any great discovery is waiting, as it were, to be recognized. It's not that Isaac Newton discovered gravity. He knew about it. He just hadn't got it explained. He hadn't got it in a mathematical form. And so he then writes his various treatises, his Principia Mathematica. And these great scientists, they're all theists. Only recently do we have this apparent dichotomy, seeming false dichotomy, really, of science and religion. It's not really there. One promotes the other promotes the one. There's no difficulty, there's no paradox, there's no struggle one against the other. This alignment has to be there. And then finally, we have to know that all these resources are registered to the divine and attributed to the divine. And that adds to the purity of the intellect. So let's try to summarize this. When we try to make decisions, we first of all get all information that is necessary, provided through this series of fields, multiple field system, available for our review. We don't have to agonize over it. We see through the application of discernment which is likely to be the best possibility. There may have to be a mechanism also where we actually physically write down the various alternatives. And then we can systematically select, oh, this one is the obvious one. And then see, does this coordinate with the highest values that we have? Namely, is it for the benefit of all? You see, when young people come to me, younger than me, they come to me and they ask about careers. I give them a kind of questionnaire. What are the things that you can do, or the interests that you have that you feel are unique to you and nobody else has them? And if they can't answer that, I say, well, what books do you like to read? More than any other books, what subjects do you like to read? That's a clue. And then what do you enjoy the most? What activity do you enjoy the most? That's a clue. What are your skills and talents? That's a clue. Then how can you apply that for the good of others? That's the final clue. Because we are here in a cooperative, coordinated way. We are here for a collective input. You want to build a house, not every person can be a plumber, not every person can be an electrician. We have to call upon the expertise of others, but we have our own expertise also, and that fits in. This is called Swadharma, your own personal skill, your own personal purpose, if you will. So based on all of that, decisions get made. Intellect is involved, mind is involved, the two are separate, as it were, but the two are correlated and work together. But finally, beyond the intellect, what is there? The intellect is only a reflection of what is there already, the inner light which we have, variously called authentic self, Atman, Purusha. These are alternate terms for the same thing, ultimately. Purusha didn't begin like that as a term, but it ended up like that. There is a self. So that when you ask what is consciousness at the subjective level, you have to ask and answer the question, who knows it? Is it the eyeball that knows it? Is it the mind that knows it? Is it the intellect that knows it? Or is there a knower behind everything that acts as a witness, a final observer, observing all of these things? I was talking to one person yesterday. We were talking about the Drisha Viveka simply because Swami Purnananda has a whole series on it. And I was pointing out, you see, he's giving a talk. Have you come across this text? He says, is it an Upanishad? I said, no, but it is certainly a valid text on Vedantic concepts that are found in the Upanishads. And we had a look. Taittiriya Upanishad, for example, is one such reference that emphasizes this accumulation of different facets to the human nature, fivefold, called koshas, panchakosha, 5 sheaths, 5 layers that we can peel off one by one, something like studying anatomy or physiology. We know that there is a muscular man. We know that if we want to study anatomy, we separate these things. A circulatory man, a neurological man, something like that. You see, a lymphatic man, a skeletal man. It's as if these things are fitted one after one inside a body, something like that. We have to see that there are, like that, various layers. What is our job? Our job is to discern things in such a way and practice in such a way that we can take off each layer one by one until we come to that final datum. And we can't go any further than that. That's the supreme knower. In answer to a question, whatever pronouncement you make, who knows it? Who is the knower of it? Is it the senses? Is it the mind? Is it exclusively mind and the senses? Is it the intellect? Is it the sense of ownership and agency? Is it the area of bliss when that we experience when all of that goes away and we go into deep sleep? Or is it something behind that, something deeply ingrained in it, something that is an ultimate observer, knower, thinker? This has been described. So I hope I answered that particular question. Okay, so now I think there's another question coming up. So let us see.
I had this one typical question in my mind that arising every now and then. So in Ramayana, after Sita left her body, okay, so Rama was in intense grief of separation, and so her children, Love and Kush, was in intense grief of separation from their mother, okay. But why? Because mother is in everywhere. She's in the tree, she's in everywhere, she's in the every cell of the body, she's in every human. Why were they in the grief? Why were they grieving with that? Because they know the truth that she's everywhere. Why were they sad or something like that?
Okay, so I'll ask you a counter question. If they were not grieving, how would the bulk of humanity interpret it? As hard-heartedness, as out of touch with what they consider and interpret to be reality. So you see, every carnation shares a divine and human nature. This is entrenched actually in Christian doctrine. After 300 years and odd, finding out, debating what is the nature of the Jesus, they came to this one conclusion and relegated all other conclusions to heresy, that this incarnation is fully God and fully man. So the similar questions can be asked. So how is it that Rama had this grief in the separation with Sita? He didn't have the grief in the loss of his kingdom. How is it that, so there's a lesson. How is it that Rama goes into despair and has to be encouraged by Lakshmana? How is it, again, the emotions that you mentioned and so on? So all of these are there. But
I have one counter question to that. So in normal, for our particular human beings right now, Like if we say we are in grief in the separation of our mother, the mother of the universe.
Mhm.
So we are taught that, okay, see mother in trees, in plants, but why not we can have mother of the universe as our own mother, like love and push had, like Rama had.
Well, we can and we should, because
Mm,
the discipline is to see that in everything, but we don't end there, because the process continues through everything, as everything, and beyond everything. And if we study the lives of these incarnations and saints, we see that that's the actual process. Rama is there to give us an example of how to behave in very difficult circumstances. That doesn't exempt a person from human reactions. I'll give you an example. Two people run 100 meters. One is completely exhausted, collapses, and has to be taken to hospital. The other one is huffing and puffing, exhausted, but after a few moments recovers. One trained and one didn't. Now, I don't have to ask you to guess which one is which. The one that trained will recover quicker. So that's the one thing. So the human reaction is there because we have such a thing as a relativity of perception. If you say that we are seeing the Divine Mother in all things, we're not saying that all things do not exist. We're saying that all things exist. We are acknowledging a relative world. But when we shift our perspective, we can say that even that relativity goes away. And we can say that everything is not just in or even through, but it's as and it's beyond also. That's the final conclusion. But if you want an example for humanity, then you can't dispense with the human nature. Human nature is real. It has to be demonstrated, and that's what makes us follow real people rather than just ideals that we cannot relate to. And so, yes, we have to cultivate the art of seeing the divine beauty everywhere. That is, to align our potential, tune our attention, I should say, into the to the divine self, or what we call God. Tuning and retuning constantly is what we should be doing. Now, the other thing is this: to people who know all of this, life is not a struggle. To people who know all of this, life is a wonderful drama, a play. And so Ram is playing his part. Sita is playing her part. She's come from the earth, she goes back to the earth. Everybody comes and goes back to their point of origin. The story of Rama does not begin with Rama's adventures in Ayodhya or birth or anything like that, or end in that way, because we have the last chapter, or the last kanda, the Uttarakhanda is there, which many people think is a subsequent thing. No, there's no evidence for that. It's only because it seems to be out of tune with a happy ever ending. Everybody lived happily ever after. Life is not everybody lived happily after. It's not like that. Where does the drama begin? It begins in the realm of heaven. It begins in a pre-existing condition. It begins with a whole drama that says there's a tyrant on the earth, Ravana. He got a boon from Brahma, and now you see what he's doing. So it begins there. Where does everything begin? It begins with pure consciousness. It begins with oneness. And what we see as birth and life and death and trees and flowers and plants is only seemingly fragmented God. And when we realize this, the fragments don't dissolve, they are still there. But with a shift in attention, they're gone. And it's not that everything is gone, it's that oneness remains. Just as the light gets fragmented into rainbow colors. And when we shift our perspective, fly above the clouds, the rainbow is gone and the glory of the sun remains. So this oneness that we call Brahman remains. But it is through a kind of apparitional causation that we call vivarta, that this apparent fragmentation takes place. And the fragmenting thing is the mind. Once we master the mind, then all these things are put into their perspective. We're able to transcend the two key directives, principal biological directives, and then we have freedom. Does freedom mean that we cease to engage? No, freedom means we are free to engage or not. We are free to play the game or not. And if we play the role of a human, then we enact demise as well. We experience sorrow, we experience gladness, but behind it all is the knowledge. A good example of this is when Ramakrishna's nephew dies, a young boy, and Ramakrishna weeps. Then he himself is surprised and asks the question, why did I weep? And if I, the one who knows everything, can weep like this, imagine those who are bound to the world and attached to the world who don't have this knowledge, you see. So very often in philosophy, we tend to declutch our humanity. And we shouldn't really do that, because in doing that, we also take away our compassion. And if we take away our compassion, I cannot be compassionate to you if you are suffering and I have never experienced what you experience. How is it possible? You see, we find it in bereavement that you mentioned. A person in the family dies, somebody's family dies. Then we go, those people who've never experienced death in their family will be very awkward. They don't know what to say. They'll say, I'm sorry for your loss, something like that, and move on quickly. In the Irish tradition, you have some sandwiches and so on, and then disappear. In fact, somebody pointed out that the Irish system is a little humorous, because somebody dies and they have a wake. They put the corpse on one side and they drink to the person's health, which seems to be a kind of contradiction in terms. So, but it's just a funny thing. So the point is this: if I have never experienced the suffering that is currently being experienced by, say, refugees, or death, bereavement, or loss, or ill health, or mental disturbance, or whatever it is, how can I possibly understand somebody else's point of view? So in order to evoke compassion, we have to have empathy. Empathy means not sympathy. Empathy means I stand in that person's shoes. I feel what they are feeling. Compassion can be a movement toward that. If I have never experienced it, then at least I can try to feel what the other person is feeling. And I may relate it to some kind of sorrow in my own life and say, I understand. I don't fully understand, but I'm certainly trying to understand what you're feeling. You see, all these great incarnations, if they had not experienced this, then how can they give any recommendations in humanity? So if I have never experienced sorrow, how can I ever say anything about sorrow? We have to accept life with its ups and downs, its joys and its sorrows. That's not the important thing. The important thing is, do we have a formula to recover quickly? Do we have a formula where we can quickly adjust the mind and create a level of internal happiness? If we're able to cultivate happiness, we're able to cultivate health. It's not the other way around. I think I quoted, when was it anyway? I think it was last time I spoke would have been, let's say, Wednesday, or maybe it was yesterday. Where I was quoting Dr. Emmett Fox. He makes this very, very astute observation that health does not produce happiness. Happiness produces health. We say, I'm happy. Why? Because I'm healthy. No, it's the other way around. I'm happy, therefore I'm healthy. He points this out beautifully, very clearly. Our mental condition immediately translates to our physical condition. So that would be my answer to the question.
Thank you.
You see, the whole of the story of Rama tells us, in the midst of adverse circumstances, how should we behave? And any normal person will behave in a certain way. What corrective actions will we take? And how will we revive our strength and our determination? And everything that was inserted into Rama's recovery was a collective thing. In other words, divine resources produced to assist. And we have to have a sense of gratitude for that. That all the resources that are ever at our disposal are divinely dispensed. They're not casual. They're not simply by chance. The difference between an atheist and a theist is the one says capital C by chance. The other one says capital G by God. Otherwise, they believe the same thing. Okay, good.
Thank you.
There's a question that is very often asked, which is regard to japa and meditation. And I'm referring to an article on the subject, which I think is very valid and very important. It comes because many people experience in spiritual practice a level of fatigue or monotony in their spiritual practice. And in order to avoid that, we have to remain vigilant and alert. And so one of the ways around this is the japa. Whether we count on our fingers or on a rosary, it's important, both from the Holy Mother's instruction and Swami Purnananda, that we emphasize what is called japa, the loving repetition of God's name, whereby the sound and the reality of the God is the same thing. So I'll read a little bit from this article. The mind has a tendency to be restless and thoughts seem to relish roaming around. It doesn't exactly begin like that, but that's what I've extracted from it. Swami Purnananda, who was a disciple of Holy Mother, she gives a very useful piece of advice to devotees who meditate on the Ramakrishna form, but we can apply it to any form. But let's take the Ramakrishna form as an example. He says, when sitting for your daily devotions, first spend a little time letting your mind roam about every corner of the Dakshinaswar Kali temple. Let me just pause there and make a commentary. We can apply it to a Jesus also, or a Buddha. We can apply it even to non-historical forms of God, such as Shiva, and so on. So we can apply it to Krishna. We can even apply it to Rama, as we have just discussed. So we can allow our mind to dwell, in the case of, say, Ramakrishna, about every corner of Dakshinaswar. the Kali temple. Now, those who have had the privilege of going to the Kali temple in Dakshinaswar will know what I'm talking about, because there's such a holy place, and even Belumat you'll find is a holy place. So where you circumambulate it, and as soon as you visit mentally every corner, then, and you can do it with any other pilgrimage site, of course, just an example. If you do it for some time, then your mind will run towards the object of your meditation. In this case, let's say Ram Krishna. And there's no limit to these incarnations, to their play, their Leela. That's why we have a whole Ramayana. That's why we have a whole Mahabharata. That's why we have a whole Bhagavatam. You want to know anything about the life of Krishna, you have to resort to the Bhagavatam. And if you want to know anything about Jesus' life, then you do the same. You imagine, here is a scene, the Lake Galilee is there. We are walking with the master, the great rabbi, who's teaching us something different. And yet it's really the same message, revived. We can imagine sitting, cooking, creating a fire, having caught fish. We then cook that. We suppose that Jesus was not a vegetarian, that he ate fish. We don't know. We assume. And we have some bread with us and we share it with everybody. So things like that. And when the mind roams around like this, immediately we'll find the mind gets settled. Now it says like this: Sri Ramakrishna taught a variety of spiritual practices, but Swami Brahmananda and Holy Mother placed special emphasis on japam. And if you study their teachings, he says, you will find that they constantly emphasize the necessity of doing this japa. Swami Brahmananda instructs like this. He says, try diligently to check this mad outward rush of your mind. You can do this successfully if you do not try to meditate as soon as you sit down. Very valuable lesson. Anybody who follows my guided meditation on Tuesdays will know I don't plunge into the meditation. We spend some time sitting. We spend some time in stillness, settling the body. Progressively, we want to go inward. We can want to take a pleasant inward journey. We want to take our time about it, with no time restrictions available. And so, do not try to meditate as soon as you sit down. First, draw the mind back from its external pursuits by means of discrimination and lock it up inside at the sacred feet of your chosen ideal. Progressively, you draw your attention away from the outside world. And when you say the outside world, the body is part of the outside world, and the mind is also part of the outside world. Although we have this tendency to say the outside world is beyond the body itself, as we've just discovered, the body itself is an object. The mind itself is an object with one constant witness. Then he says, then make japa and meditate. If you try diligently to follow this course for some time, the mind will naturally cease to wander. And the way of japam is the easiest to follow. By constantly performing japam, the mind can easily be made calm and steady, and finally it will lose itself in God, or lose itself in God. Therefore, he says, I ask you to perform japam regularly and often, and at the same time, meditate on the chosen ideal while you're repeating it. I'm adding while you're repeating this. This combined practice brings quick success. And he also said once, have firm faith in God and in his name. Unite God with his name. God dwells in the heart of the devotees as the mantra. Repeat God's name and listen to his praises. God and the name of God are identical. If you get involved in this world without repeating his name, you will be lost in a maze. This is a dramatic statement, but a simple one, and simple to practice as well. Anyway, a common complaint among beginners is that they don't feel any results. And Swami Purnananda constantly had to reassure his disciples that if they didn't feel any results in the beginning, they would feel them later on. And of course, perseverance is the key to this. In fact, he tells one disciple, follow some spiritual discipline for at least 3 years, and then if you find you have made no tangible progress, you may come back and slap my face. And the Holy Mother always addressed the practice of japa when she was with sincere devotees. All perform this or that discipline because they think it's their duty to do so. But how many seek God? No doubt you must do your duties. It keeps one's mind in good condition. That's an interesting thing. Why do we work? You ask people. Some people may say to advance my career. Some people may say to get money, to earn a living, to pay a mortgage or whatever it is. But here the approach is very different. It says, it keeps, my Holy Mother is saying, it keeps one's mind in good condition. We're practicing these things in order to keep the mind in good condition. No good having a car and saying, I will never run it. I'll keep it in a garage and watch it rust. It has to be used, exercised, managed. What I say to people who are retiring, I say, I'm not retiring because tiring wasn't there in the first place. To have a re-edition of it is not possible. So if you are in that condition, then make sure that you have some hobby, some new interest. This is for everybody. Learn something new every day. Keep your level of enthusiasm up. There are many things, most things we don't know. Most things about the universe we don't know. And if we explore them to their ultimate, we'll find God. One new thing that I learned today, you see, cosmologists say, through about 3 different sorts of calculations that seem to agree, that the universe is about 13.8 billion years. There's a few million years leeway in it. But the most recent discovery suggests that at least one person has a model that says that it is twice that. It is actually something like 27 million years, or I should say billion, 27 billion years old. And he validates it through various calculations and using different criteria. So now you see, one of the powerful evidences for that is the recent observational discoveries from the James Webb Telescope. Now, whether the theory is correct or not, this is something new that shakes up people's standard view of the universe. I find it interesting. Now, this may not interest you, but something else may interest you. And so if you learn something new, today we have all the technology to learn something new. This is one of the great gifts of modern science. She goes on to say, but it is also very necessary to practice japa, meditation, and prayer. She puts these 3 together. At one sitting, japa we can start with. Meditation we can start with. What is prayer? Prayer is the art of listening, the art of being still. Be still and know that you are God is the phrase. To get into a condition where your will and the divine will is one and the same, and a discerning takes place. That kind of prayer. Prayer, of course, is also of other different types as well. Very often a question comes up. Since there is only this oneness, is there any point in praying? And another person who's a devotee might say, should we really bother God with some petty things about our life? And the answer to both these questions is yes, we should. If you're a child of God and you lack something, then won't you pull at the mother's dress and say, please, may I have this? And a loving parent, if it's for our good, will supply it. Who else will supply it? Supply is already there. The storehouse and supply is with the divine. So she goes on to say, one must practice these disciplines at least in the morning and in the evening. At least. At least. Every competent teacher I know will say this, morning and evening. Such practice is like the rudder of a boat, and when one sits in the evening for prayer, one can discriminate whether one has done good or bad things in the course of the day. This is the Holy Mother's very unique instruction. At the end of the day, the mind is occupied with many things. Sit down, review all the events of the day, and see which things went well, which things didn't go well, and how can I adjust them for the next day. Then one should compare the mental state of that day with that of the previous one. Next, while performing japa, one should meditate on one's chosen ideal while performing japa. That means visualizing it. And in meditation, one first sees the face of one's chosen deity, but one should try to meditate on the entire body. So we start with the face. Now, many systems will say start with the feet and work your way up. She's saying start with the face. You see, if you meet anybody in the street, even for the first time you meet somebody, where do you look? It's the face. You read the person from the face. Unless you practice meditation side by side with your work, how will you know whether you are doing the desirable or undesirable thing? Japa is meditation with breaks, as it were, she says. Meditation is the natural spontaneous expansion of japa in the heart, the result of japa correctly practiced with devotion and dedication. In other words, japa certainly strengthens devotion, but it's only when japa occurs together with true dhyana or meditation that the mind spontaneously turns inwards, away from outer things. Then she says, after practicing japa along with meditation for some time, japa ceases by itself and the aspirant becomes established in meditation alone. It's wrong if the mind is drawn to worldly objects. By worldly objects, I mean money, family, and so on, but it's natural for the mind to think of the work in which one is engaged. If meditation is not possible, repeat God's name, and the meditative mood will come. Now, of course, repeating God's name has to be done accompanied with a feeling of love. Repeating a mantra without this attachment, without this feeling, is simply monotonous. Another quote from the Divine Mother, Holy Mother Sharada Devi as we call her. My child, this mind is just like a wild elephant. It races with the wind. Therefore, one should discriminate all the time. One should work hard for the realization of God. What a wonderful mind I had at that time. Somebody used to play on the fluted Dakshinaswara. As I listened to the sound, my mind would be extremely eager for the realization of God. I thought the sound was coming directly from God, and I would enter into samadhi. So I hope that this is useful to you in terms of practical practice. We close off by chanting peace, peace, peace 3 times. Om Shanti, Shanti, Shanti. Peace, peace, peace be unto all. Thanks.
Thank you, Swamiji.
Thank you, Swamiji.
Thank you.
Thank you, Swamiji. Thank you, Swami.
Okay, all good.
Thank you, Swamiji.
Swamiji.
Om